I'm glad that whatever brought you here. We're going to talk tonight about study as a spiritual practice, which is a very wide topic, but it's sort of one of the central pillars of Jewish spiritual practice is study. You know, we're often talked about as the people of the book, although that's not. That actually came from the Muslims calling us the people of the book. I think we've taken that on as part of our culture. But one of the central tenets of Judaism is the importance of study. And we teach it to our children, so much so that, you know, there are Jewish people in every field who excel. If you look at the United States Senate, you know, we are disproportionately Jews are a disproportionately large number of senators. If you look at science, Jews are a disproportionately large number of scientists, professors, etc., etc., etc. For some reason, the Jewish culture has valued study, not just study of Torah, but study in general, to the point where we have really accomplished much in the area of study and in the area of academic accomplishments. So I want to talk today about part of the reason I think why that is, but also talk about study in general as a spiritual practice. I want to start by looking at just a quick quote from this packet here that I put up today. Page 3, it says 3, written by hand, 3 on the bottom there. This is from Rabbi Yitzchak Ginsburg, a contemporary teacher of Kabbalah. Can I have somebody read this quote? The service.
The service of meditation is a spiritual and intellectual quest to know, comprehend, and feel an idea or truth of Torah to the fullest extent possible. By pursuing a matter to its depth, one draws his inherited and instinctive knowledge of God into a more revealed and conscious state. The purpose of meditation is to train a person to perceive reality more correctly.
Does anybody have a reaction to that? I mean, I would say what's interesting is he says that's all of meditation. I would say this is one kind of meditation. Right? There's sort of meditation on silence, you know, silencing the ego, silencing the mind, which I think it's about concentration, but it's not about study in that same way. There are different sorts of meditation. There's walking meditation, right, which is sort of being attentive to your movement. There's yoga. There's all sorts of different meditation. So for him, meditation in general is comprehending an idea. For me, I would say one form of meditation, the way I would amend this quote is, one form of meditation is the spiritual and intellectual quest to know, comprehend, and feel an idea or truth of Torah. Torah, in my definition, that would be knowledge in general, to the fullest extent possible. By pursuing a matter to its depth, one draws his inherited and instinctive knowledge of God, maybe God as ultimate truth, into a more revealed and conscious state. Does somebody want to read that second quote? Meditation. Mike?
Meditation is a continuous flow of thought upon a particular object or point of focus.
So this is a medieval yoga philosopher, Patanjali, and I would agree with that, and I would say that in the context of study, it's the flow of thought upon a particular text, a particular piece of writing that has been written by a particular person. Any comments about either of these quotes before we move on?
One could go into meditation with a specific purpose.
What's that?
One could go into, so therefore it would vary from individual.
Yes.
In terms of what is my purpose to go under.
Right, so a meditation could be that you are just setting out to sit down and think about something, to think about one particular topic till you get to its conclusion.
Or as
being.
Being. Yeah.
Although this sounds more solution-oriented, like
Mm-hmm.
thinking about one particular thing sounds like there's a goal there.
Right. There might be a goal, but what I'm going to get to eventually, especially with the study of text and looking into particular issue that way, the deeper you get into the thinking about a thing, the more pathways open up, and in the end, in my view at least, it becomes infinite. There's like an infinite number of, so there's never in the end one solution, one pathway that you come to. It's an infinite number of pathways that you could end up, finding. There was a time when I was sort of stressed out and I couldn't sleep, and I decided to do a meditation. And the meditation was on just thinking of a story idea, and then just like writing the story in my head and going through the entire story, right? So it's the focusing the mind on one topic, one pathway, and it could branch off into many infinite different pathways, but the beginning is one. So let's actually, I want to
never be able to fall asleep, though.
never be able to fall asleep, right? Unless you just get bored of it, and then sometimes in meditation, I'll meditate because I know that I'll fall asleep. That this meditation is just not, I'm not going to be able to concentrate.
What I was going to say, the second definition, leaving off the word meditation, a contiguous flow of thought upon a particular object of focus, could also be a shamanic journey. It's the exact same thing. You have something you want a solution to, and the word that comes to mind most is introspection.
Mm-hmm.
That you experience something, and then you bring it inside you, and you're going with your experience, with whatever emotions or whatever, your essence is going to react with that thing in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's either meditation or journeying.
Or journeying or introspection. There's a very famous quote. I had to close the door. The klezmer, however beautiful, is distracting me.
It will be beautiful Friday night, by the way.
Is it Friday night?
It will be beautiful. Yes, people watching the video should come. You should come Friday night to Temple Beth Shalom to the klezmer Shabbat. So there's a beautiful story that is from the Talmud about 4 rabbis, and if you've taken the Jewish mysticism course, you might have heard this story before, but basically says 4 rabbis entered the Pardes, and Pardes means orchard, or it means like heavens, and the idea was that these rabbis would do like a shamanic journey in a specific kind of mysticism where they would put their heads down on the ground, just like tunneling down in shamanism, and they would descend, it says, to the Merkava. They would go down into these levels of 7 levels of heaven. And they would enter the Pardes, which means the orchard or the paradise, right? Pardes, paradise. And in this story, and this is equated often with introspection and study, and I'll tell you why in a minute. It says that these 4 rabbis entered the Pardes. Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Elisha ben Abuya, Rabbi Ben Azai, and Rabbi Ben Zoma. And the story goes that they were to enter this Pardes, and they would ascend from level to level, and they would have to say different formulaic passwords at each level, but it says don't say water, for whatever reason, because that will destroy you. But what ends up happening is the 4 go up to the Pardes, and it says only one came out unscathed. One of them died. His soul could not come back to his body after doing this journey. One of them became crazy when he came back. And the story goes, this is Ben Zoma, that he was found by the seashore, looking out at the sea and holding up his 2 fingers and saying, there are only 2 fingers between the heavens and the earth. There are only 2 fingers between the heavens, and he went crazy. The third one, Elisha ben Abuya, they say, became an apostate. He left Judaism. He became a heretic. And the reason for that was that they said he went up to the heights of the heavens, and he saw Metatron, who was this great, awesome angel that was so amazingly beyond his understanding that he thought, oh, there must be two gods, Metatron and God and Adonai. And so he became a dualist. He became somebody who believed, a Gnostic, somebody who believed in two gods. And so he ended up believing in the Jewish people. And the only one who came out unscathed was Rabbi Akiva, who we all know as this very famous Torah scholar. Now, Pardes, that word, means orchard, but it's also a four-letter Hebrew word which is set out as a sort of blueprint for how to study Torah and how to be introspective, really about anything that you encounter in your life. So here's the four levels. Pardes, here I'll write them in English here. Pei, Resh, Dalet, and Samech. And it corresponds to things that we talked about last time and the time before, which are, if you remember from before, we have the four worlds. There's the world of the physical, the world of the emotions, the world of the mind, and the world of the spirit. And then at the last class, we talked about the four levels of the soul, 4/5. The nefesh, which is the animal soul, which is sort of like about your autonomic nervous system. The ruach, which is about your emotional self. The neshama, which is your intellectual self. And the yechida and chaya, which is your spiritual center, your spiritual self. This is very similar in a way. This is about Torah study. What they say is there are four levels of studying any text, and I think really experiencing anything in the world. The first is the pei, which corresponds to the word pshat, which means the face value. It comes from the root pei shin tet, which means simple. Pashut in Hebrew means simple, right? So, for example, when you read a text, let's say it's the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right? The Goldilocks and the Three Bears pshat would be a girl finds a house and she enters the house and she does all these things, and then the bears come home and they catch her and she runs away, right? So that's the pshat. That's the face value of the story. The remez is sometimes called the allegorical way of looking at a story or a text. I like to see it as corresponding directly to this level, the heart level, which is to say, how does this story, text, experience affect you on an emotional level? What's your emotional reaction to the story? And so you hear the story of Goldilocks and you say, oh, that's really disturbing that this poor girl was chased off, or maybe that girl herself, I feel like, what was she doing there? I'm really angry at her, like your basic emotional reactions to the story, beyond just the face value of what's going on. The drash means seeking out. The root, darash, means to seek out. Oh, sorry, I didn't say what remez means. Remez, the word, means hint. Right? And so, in a way, when you have an emotional reaction to something, it gives you a hint of what's going on a deeper level with that thing. Right? Even a person that you meet, right? You might see them on the face value, oh, they look very nice, but there's something that's off emotionally when you talk to them. There's something that feels off. So it gives you a little bit of a hint of what's going on with them. You don't know exactly what it is, but it's sort of a hint, right? It's an emotional hint, right? So then drash comes from the root for to seek out. In Hebrew, one of the words for study hall is a beit midrash, meaning a house of seeking out. Right? That's what a study hall is called. Sometimes a synagogue is called a beit midrash. a hall of seeking out. A hall of, and drash is often equated with study. Like seeking out truth is like studying. This is the third level, and it corresponds to the intellectual, right? So you're thinking with your mind very deeply about what's the meaning of this? What are the different permutations of what this can mean? When you give a talk at a synagogue, in English it's called a sermon. In Hebrew, it's called a drash, right? Which is what this level of interpretation is called, right? It's a drash, meaning an interpretation. And sometimes it's called metaphor, right? This is the metaphorical level. And the way that I see it, by the way, is very much, you were talking about, there being sort of one solution to a problem, right? The way I see it, though, is the level where there's one is the pshat, is the face value. That's where there's one. When it comes to the level of ruach, or your emotional reaction to something, there might be several different emotional reactions that you can have to a text. Right? And then when you get to the level of drash, there's, I think, even more levels of interpretation you could have of a text. And then the final level is called sod, or secret. And this is what's equated with the mystical interpretation of a text. And this is seen as sort of a very deep level of what this text means on a sort of cosmic level. Like what's going on here on a cosmic level. And even, in an experience that you have, you can do all of these things, and then you get to the point where what's going on here on a cosmic level. And again, maybe here it might come down to one, but it's also, there's sort of like an infinite number of ways that you can end up, right? Depending on which path you follow, through your emotions, through your mind, and then you end up going to your spirit, to the secret, mystical level of interpretation. And this is what's called the Pardes model of study. And it's no coincidence, Mike, that you mentioned shamanism, because the rabbis of the Talmud engaged in these practices, which oftentimes are compared to shamanistic practices in many of the ways that they were practiced, and they were studied. Right? It was a sort of a study shamanism in a way. And when it says that they ascended the Pardes, it could have meant that they were studying together. And what are the possible, right? We said there were 4 of them, right? And they had 4 reactions. Right? One of them just died. He couldn't come back to his physical body. Right? And I almost say he couldn't get back to the pshat level, the physical world. Right? Another one of them went crazy. He had this craziness. He couldn't sort of emotionally deal with what he'd experienced in the parties. Another one of them became an apostate. Right? Elisha ben Abuya. And to me, he sort of had an intellectual problem. He couldn't intellectually rectify all of the things that he'd experienced when he was ascending to these higher worlds. And Akiva sort of was existing on this sort of level. He was able to come back down and experience all of it and come back down. Anybody have any reactions to what I've said so far?
Well, one of the things in terms of shamanistic journeys is there was a particular thing. They actually had you make a commitment about coming back. It was you had to make a commitment, say who you wanted to come back for. But, there was very specific things before. It was a deep kind of shamanistic journey. Not all of them like that, but it was reminded them of that. So, but I have trouble still with meditation being studied, because I always consider meditation as not focusing on the thoughts. So it doesn't feel meditative to me. I could be focusing a part of my breathing, part of my nostrils. That's more meditation to me. So when they talk about your definitions of meditation were like,
Right, the Patanjali.
right,
Meditation is a continuous flow of thought upon
Yes.
a particular object or point
Right.
of focus.
I mean, I can see it as study. I can see the thing about shamanism because you do go in with a focus of a thought and you focus on that thought. Then it's hard for me to see it as meditation.
Right, I think, at least from my studies, it's a different modality of meditation. Right, there's the modality of meditation which is focus on your breath or focus on your experience of the present moment, right? And then the thoughts, you're sort of trying to get rid of your thoughts and the ego. Here it's saying, and it's almost, you're also trying to get to the point of quieting your thoughts and your ego, but the way you're doing it here is not focusing on your breath or not focusing on your experience of the present moment, but focusing on one particular idea or one particular text, and to let that entire thing become your entire experience of reality. And the extraneous thoughts, I think, are things that might take you away from it.
Right.
But again, this is just a different modality of meditation, right? Which is one where you are focusing on a particular thought or a particular text, rather than no thought, or not letting your mind go. Back to this original model of the four worlds, right? I would say that the focus of meditation, that the kind of meditation that you're sort of focusing on is the body, right? Like being aware of your breath, being aware of your bodily sensations in the moment, right? There's also meditation in the mind, right? Which is meditation on a thought, which is meditation on an intellectual pursuit. There's also meditation which is in the heart, right? To meditate on feelings that you might be having, to experience those feelings, to sit with those feelings, and have your experience of those feelings. You're nodding your head. No, yes. Mike.
No, what I'm just thinking that it's more a semantic argument. And you're talking about different practices.
Right.
And in our culture, and because of the amount of mindfulness, and that it has a different definition, but there are four practices there. I always tell the story, and I'm sure I said it here at some time or in the other course, that I was able to totally clear my mind at 4 years old between putting one sock on and the other. And I would just stop. And you know what my mother said? Michael, stop moping.
It can often be interpreted that way as moping. But I would say, yes, I mean, so my response, and I think Mike's response is sort of similar, is there are different modalities of meditation. One modality of meditation is the one that you're talking about. Another modality of meditation is the intellectual sort of study modality, and that can be just as fruitful as many of the others, and it can even be focused on a scientific concept. For somebody who's a scientist, their sort of laser focus on a scientific idea or scientific concept can take them beyond themselves and put them in a level that they might not have attained otherwise, have they not focused their minds on that particular concept or particular idea. So there's these four levels of study. I want to just point to this text here that says Torah study in 4 dimensions. Right, so there's a famous quote from Pirkei Avot, from the rabbis, that says, "Turn it and turn it, for everything is in it," meaning the Torah, right? Which means that you should study and study it all the time, even the same stories, the same text, over and over and over again, because in a sense, you can just keep returning to it and get something new every time. And the way I think about it sometimes is like Don Quixote. They say when you read Don Quixote when you're young, you'll have one interpretation, and you're older, you'll have another interpretation, and every time you read it, you'll have another interpretation. Or the philosopher Heraclitus, who said, you can never step into the same stream twice. Right? That every time you study something, you're different, and the text hits you differently. There's another version of this turn it and turn it for everything is in it that says, turn it and turn it for everything is in you. Right? Which is to say that you're returning to the study, to all of these different times of studying the text, because you're actually exploring yourself and your own psyche and your own consciousness. And so I would say, Carol, that's another way that it's a deep meditation, which is that you can notice when you study a text and you're in one state of mind, and then you study the same text and you're in a different state of mind. Let's say it's studying the Torah text, right, and you do Bereshit, the Genesis story, and you feel one way about it, you're experiencing it one way, but then the next year you read it again and you're feeling a different way about it. Right? That tells you a lot about yourself. Sometimes I like to think of texts as like Rorschach ink blots, right? That they have no meaning in and of themselves, right? There's just the shape itself. What it is a mirror to reflect what's inside of you. Right? The text is reflecting what's inside of you. So here, Rabbi Goldie Milgram, who's a colleague of mine, she has a method of Torah study based on the Four Worlds model and based on the Pardes model that I just talked about. And what she says is, first, dimension 1, world of Asiyah, is you read the actual text aloud. So this is actually she sets forth a practice of meditation in study. Right? So what you do first is you read the actual text aloud in a language that works for you. Then you look at the actual words and phrases and the characters very carefully and see it for what it is. Right? This is the pshat level. What is happening in the text? Who is speaking? What did they say or do? Right? And then the second level, dimension 2. This is the remez, the hint. World of Yetzirah. This is your kishkas. This is your emotional world. What are the feelings that this text is bringing up for you? Right? And so this is the remez level. This is the hint level. So when you read a text, how are you feeling when you're reading the text? Are you disturbed? Are you angry? Are you sad? And the way Rabbi Goldie Milgram suggests doing it is reading the text aloud and expressing with a word or a movement the emotion that you're feeling when you're reading the text. And you can do this in a group or you can do it alone, right? Do you have something?
I have something to tell her.
Okay.
This is big book study. It may not be the Torah. In the 12-step program, every year they read the same big book, right? You go through it. Each time people have grown and they see new things.
Right. It could be, the AA book. It could be the Torah. It could be, anything that you return to over time. Like your favorite book. When I read my children, my son, one of my favorite books is Where the Wild Things Are by Maurice Sendak. When I was a kid, it was a cool story about this kid who wouldn't go to bed, and he meets these monsters. Now I read that story and sometimes I cry and I think about in my life how I sort of went to the dark side and where the monsters are and I had difficult experiences in my life that I got over, and I sort of was escaping my childhood home, and right. So you could look at that story. You could look at it as the face value of the story. You could look at it as a deeper emotional experience when you read that story when you're older, right? So I read that story to my son now, and when I read it, I experience it completely differently than when I read it to him. Read it to myself when I was a kid, or my mom read it to me when I was a kid. But you could say the same of any text, right? It could be the big book, it could be the Torah, it could be whatever. But it's something that you return to.
And I want to say, I object to the meditation of using it as a face value. I don't believe it's a face value because it's not to the body.
So what you're saying is there's never a face value? Is that what?
No, there may be a face value, but it's more than that.
It's more than
It's
that.
deeper than that.
Say more.
Yes, same thing. No, it's just because emotions come up, other things come up.
Well, but that's getting to the next level,
Yes,
right?
I'm saying, but you had said that it was mainly the body sensations, and I'm saying, no, the focus is really not on my body. The focus is on my, just the nostrils and my nose.
So,
Just
using
the
the body. It's almost like you're using the body to get yourself to emotional levels or higher levels, like through breath. But I think you're saying...
Well, in the context of the four worlds, right, which is the physical / body, the emotional, the intellectual, and the spiritual, there's that frame, and I've overlaid Pardes onto that frame, which is a textual way of studying Torah, which says that Pshat is just the face value level of the Torah. And I've sort of mixed the two and said, well, body equals face value, right? But what you're saying, what I'm hearing you saying, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is sometimes body can be an emotional reaction. Is that what?
Well, what I'm saying is that I think it's more than just the face value. That's what I'm saying, is that it is, you are in your body, but it is more than the outcome is more than the face value.
Yes.
It has all different kinds of levels.
Yes.
To all different kinds of levels.
Yes.
All of those four levels.
Yes.
Can.
And I would say that in this frame, in this modality, there's the idea of when you read a text of saying, like, what's the simplest way of just saying what this text says? Like when I'm teaching the 7th graders how to write a Torah talk, a Devar Torah for their bar mitzvah, I say, write a summary of what this says. And they say, okay, in this text, God creates the heavens and the earth. There's no emotion in there. You know, there's no intellectual depth in there. There's no spirit in there. It's just what happens. Right? And that's the sense of the Pshat level. The sense of the Remez level is, well, how does this text make you feel? How does it make you feel in your body? Could be, how does it make you feel, it could also in your heart, right? And then the next level is, well, then what does this text make you think? Like, what are the different possible thoughts you could have about this text? What are the theories you could have about what it means? And then finally, it's like, what's the deep spiritual truth that you can get out of this text?
Which does seem like one thing. Like when you get to the end, the solution. It does sound like the solution. Like the rabbi that does reach, the spiritual top. You think, oh, he found the truth. Like it does appear like one truth.
But I think it's different for each person, right? You might reach one spiritual truth, and not just different for one person, but different for each person in each time that they study that particular text, right? When I read Where the Wild Things Are, when I studied Where the Wild Things Are when I was a kid, my deep spiritual truth of it might have been like, hey, don't be so difficult for your parents, because you might end up in this place where the wild things are and not be able to come back. When I read it now, the deep spiritual truth, it might be like, sometimes you have to descend into like the darkness of the being with, the darkness of the world before you can come back and, be back to your home, right? So I think there are multiple, but it's depending on the person and the place and the time. There's a very famous Buddhist phrase which was made into a song by Donovan. First there is a mountain, then there is no mountain, then there is. First there is a mountain, then there is no mountain, then there is. Right? So in a certain sense, you go through all this, right? The mountain is the Pshat, right? It's the mountain. There it is. Then there's no mountain, right? Then you go through all of these like levels of interpretation, how it makes you feel, and then there is, right? The mountain is still the mountain, but you've changed through your process of encountering the mountain, right? That the mountain is still the mountain, but you've transcended and included the mountain as it is in its face value. And the same thing with any text, right? You've transcended and included how it is that you study the text. So Torah study can be done in all of these different dimensions. I would like,
Just one
yeah.
more comment. As
Sure.
I'm looking at that, you were showing a way of going to ultimate truth, going up the steps. And I would say there's an argument. I don't know how valid. I have to think about it. I haven't resolved it in my mind. But there is an argument for switching mind and heart. That the body, mind, then the emotion, and then spirit.
So you look at the face value, and then you really think about it, and then you feel what's going on in your
Because you're
teeth.
But
hard,
that's you.
you're
That's
internalizing.
you. Everyone is different. Some
Yeah.
are more feeling person. It's
Right.
Jungian psychology,
Right.
How do you fit into the 4 categories?
Right.
And that
What are
controls
your
our
basic
life.
What are your basic inclinations?
Right.
I would say that the feeling before the thought is, for me, I experience something as a feeling before I can really understand it with my thoughts. You know, like
think about it. I hadn't
like-
resolved it.
like at Stiebel, this is the Havdalah service that I do once a month. We did it this Saturday. You guys were there, and I came out of it, and I felt like something felt off a little bit. I just felt like a little like something was weird, and then I started to think about it, and I thought, well, I think it might have been the design of the way the space was. I think it might have been this and that, but before the thought, there was the feeling of something's missing here, right? And so and you might experience things differently. You might go into your thoughts and think about, and then your feelings come. But for me, it's like I have a feeling, and just then I have to think about what it is that the depth of that, what it is that's causing that feeling.
That's very artistic. You have to know the feeling. As an artist, I get that feeling to know if I'm doing sculpture, whether I'm doing it feels right to me, then I know it's right. If it doesn't feel right, I have to improve. There's something wrong, and then I know. But it's something I feel. Yeah, I feel it.
Right, there's that great poem by E.E. Cummings. Since feeling is first, he who gives any attention to the syntax of things will never wholly kiss you. It's the beginning of that poem. It's a beautiful poem.
I find this difficult to accept because the way I was taught meditation was to clear the mind, to use a mantra, and if thoughts come to you, you kind of send them away, and it was a way to give the mind a rest.
That's a beginner's
Meditation.
mind.
What?
That's a beginner's
The
mind.
beginner's mind.
Right, as I
And
said,
then as you progress, things change.
right, and as I said to Carol, right, that's one modality of meditation. This is another modality of meditation. And this modality of meditation is focusing the mind on a particular issue or thought or text and seeing where it takes you. And I would put forth that this is also a way of deeply exploring yourself and ultimately getting beyond your ego, right? So that when you're studying the text, that's the other thing you have to realize. When you're studying a text and you go through all these levels, you have to realize it's all a reflection of what's inside of you, right? And that's the point, right? And that's why it's a productive meditation, is you're seeing a reflection of your own ego, right? They said there's this great teaching about Moses and all of the other prophets. It says that all of the prophets saw through a mirror darkly. The Aramaic is a speklaria she'ena me'ira. Except for Moses, who saw through a light mirror, a speklaria she'me'ira. And what this means is, it's a very complicated way of saying, that all of the prophets have this revelation, right? They have this sort of experience of enlightenment. And all of them except for Moses, at least according to our tradition, they still had levels of their ego that were clouding their vision of ultimate reality. That only Moses was able to see the pure light, which was ultimate reality, unfiltered. But all of the other prophets had levels of ego, so when they looked in the mirror, meaning when they looked at God or ultimate reality, that what they saw reflected back was their own darkness, right? And that own darkness inside of themselves, or their own ego from themselves, they saw reflected back to them. So, like, for example, Ezekiel was another prophet besides Moses. They said that he was standing on the river Kfar in Babylon, and he saw a chariot descend with wheels within wheels, and these animals moving around, and this man on top of a chariot. What he was seeing was something that was inside of his own ego, and inside of his own self. When it says that Moses had a vision of God, he saw pure light, right? And I mean, this is just the way we conceive of Moses, as being completely without ego, completely humble, right? And I would say that the truth is for all of us, when we study a text or when we do meditation, what's there, what's in our mind, that is it's not actual reality. That's not actually us. It's a reflection of our ego. It's a reflection of that darkness inside of us that we're being aware of, that we're seeing. And so it's sort of, not always easy to come to terms with, but when you study a text, what you're seeing is a reflection of what's inside of you. Turn it, for everything is inside of you.
Our truth is our perception.
Our truth is our perception, and that's why it's a meditation just as valid, I would say, as a breathing meditation or whatever kind of meditation. Which is why I engage in Torah study as one of the levels of meditation. There's a chapter in this book, A Book of Life, about Torah study as spiritual practice. I encourage you to look at it later. Can somebody give me a time check? Okay, so we got a little bit more time.
I think what if you had introduced this? Most of you are familiar with the shot meditation, but there's also drash meditation,
Remez meditation.
right?
Yeah. I could have introduced it that way as well. So what I'd like to do now, in our remaining time, is to look at one particular text about Hanukkah, because it's Hanukkah right now, and to see how one particular rabbi, whose name is Kalonymus Kalman Halevi Epstein, a Hasidic master, interpreted this particular text. It's on the back of this packet, where it says Text Study Hanukkah. So happy Hanukkah, everybody. This text is the top text here in the box. I'll show it to everybody here. We'll take a screen grab of that. This top text is from the Gemara, Masechet Shabbat, means the tractate talking about Shabbat 21a. And you'll think about what the pshat level, the face value level of this text is, and then we'll see where he goes with it on drash, remez, and sod level. I think he includes all of it at once, but I'm going to just give you an example of one Rebbe's way of going deep into one text. Mitzvah Ner Chanukah. The mitzvah of the Hanukkah light is to light one candle or lamp each night for a person and his or her household. And those who are fervent in observing the mitzvot light one each night for each and every person in their household. And for those who most fervently observe the mitzvot, Beit Shammai says that on the first day one kindles 8 lights and from then continuously decreases. But Beit Hillel says that on the first day one kindles 1 light and then from then on continuously increases. So do we all understand what this means on the pshat level, on the face value level? Right. So the face value level is you can light one menorah for all of your family, or each person could light a menorah, and that's even better. Right? And then there's a disagreement between Hillel and Shammai. Well, you could start with 1 candle and then increase, or you could start with 8 candles and then decrease. Very simple, halachic, Jewish law
But I was so
what
surprised
practice.
to hear about the 8 candles and decreasing. It was like, the first time I heard it, I was like, wow.
Wow, that's another way to do it.
Yes.
Eddie said on Saturday, you just had 2 Hanukkah. Do one way.
One way, one the other way, right? So we're already getting, by the way, into drash level of this text, right? Right. The statement of the text is, well, there's 2 different ways to do it, right? And there's 2 different ways to, either light one or light many, right? So now we're going to look at Kalonymus Kalman Halevi Epstein, what he said this text means, and we're going to take it a little slow because it's not necessarily super easy. So this text appears to be a hint that a righteous person, meaning a tzaddik, this is the Kabbalistic version of like a bodhisattva, right? An enlightened person. So a righteous person, an enlightened person, merits the holy soul, nefesh, remember the levels of the soul I talked about, and spirit, ruach. And if you take the word nefesh and the word ruach, the first letter of each spells out ner, which means candle. Right? So when it says mitzvat ner Hanukkah, this is the mitzvah of the candle of Hanukkah, he says it's not talking about a candle. It's talking about your nefesh and your ruach, these 2 levels. That's what a hint, by the way, hint is remez, right? So you've got a feeling here. Oh wait, I'm reading this text and I see the word ner. There's something more there. I have a feeling that it's not talking just about a candle, but it's talking about levels of the soul. Nefesh and ruach. Right, so that's his first hint. So the hint is, it's talking about nefesh and ruach, these 2 levels, and so can bring spiritual healing to all those who are joined to him, called his household. So now he's going into drash a little bit here. He's saying, well, if ner means nefesh and ruach, meaning your soul, and we're talking about an individual here who's a tzaddik, who's an enlightened person, and his household, what's household mean? Well, household means your disciples. Right? So this text isn't just a legal thing talking about how to light candles for Hanukkah. It's talking about how a tzaddik, how an enlightened bodhisattva in Judaism, how an enlightened person can give enlightenment to his disciples. People following? Mm-hmm. Right? So can bring spiritual healing to all those who are joined to him, called his household, and share with them the holy light. Right? So here we're saying, this text is saying, well, how does a tzaddik, how does a righteous person convey enlightenment to his followers? Well, he can, from his own light, from his own nefesh and ruach, give enlightenment to his followers. Right? That's the beginning of this text. Those who are aware, however, do a self-reckoning, an atonement for their deeds, and do not depend on the righteous one, the enlightened one, alone, and can heal themselves, so that they merit the holy soul and spirit, the nefesh and ruach. Right? So, second part of the text, right? The mitzvah of the Hanukkah light is to light 1 candle or a lamp each night, meaning your soul, your one soul, as an enlightened person, you can enlighten your followers. Right? This is like a charismatic leader. This is like a Swami whatever, a guy who taught the Beatles. What was his name? The Maharishi, right? It's like he can go and he can, through his enlightenment, he can enlighten other people, right? So what it's saying is, well, it's not about lighting. You light your menorah and then it covers your whole household. No, what it's about is you enlighten yourself, your nefesh and ruach, your own soul, and that in turn can enlighten your disciples. Right? They get the credit. Or the second option that he just mentioned is, back up to the original text, and those who are fervent in observing the mitzvot, light 1 each night for each and every person in their household. So what he's saying is, right, those who are aware do a self-reckoning and atonement for their deeds and do not depend on the righteous one. So this is he's saying, well, yes, there's the enlightened person can give you enlightenment, or there's the democratization of enlightenment. That each person on their own can achieve enlightenment on their own by their own meditation and study and whatever they do. They don't need the tzaddik. They don't need the righteous person. They don't need the enlightened bodhisattva to do it for them. Each member of the household, quote unquote, can do it themselves. People following? Mm-hmm. Hooray. Right, so they can heal themselves so that they merit the holy soul and spirit, the nefesh and the ruach. Those who perpetually seek atonement with God ascend continuously from step to step. All of this is hinted at in the Gemara. Mitzvat ner Chanukah means the mitzvah is to dedicate the soul and spirit to service of God. Blessed be He. I don't like He. Thus, an especially righteous person can include his household in this dedication, while those who search their souls and return to God each have their own nefesh and ruach and soul and spirit. So it's sort of a restatement of what he just said, which is one enlightened person can give enlightenment to other people, or you could democratize enlightenment and say each enlightened person can get it, can attain it for themselves. And those who are always returning to God are like Beit Shammai's way of lighting, in that they continuously decrease themselves in their humility. Right? So now Hillel versus Shammai lighting isn't about, you light all the candles first and then you decrease, or you light one candle and then you increase. It's about, lighting all the candles first and then decreasing. It's a teaching about humility. It's a teaching about decreasing your light so that other people's light can shine. Right? It's not a legal text at all, right? He's studying the Gemara here, right? He's saying he's interpreting the Gemara on a mystical level. He's saying, actually, it's not about lighting Hanukkah candles at all. It's about decreasing your ego, right? So, a especially righteous person can include his household in dedication. And those who are always returning to God are like Beit Shammai's way of lighting, in that they are continuously decrease themselves in their humility, and like Beit Hillel's way, in that they continuously increase in holiness. So not only are they're not just decreasing in their ego, but they're increasing. As they decrease their ego, they're increasing their holiness. And this is the way Rabbi Kalanimus Kalman Halevi Epstein reads this tiny piece of Gemara, which originally was written as a completely shot, face value legal text about what you're supposed to do on Hanukkah. Different opinions on what you're supposed to do on Hanukkah. He's taken this text, which originally had this very simple meaning, and he's elevated it to a deep spiritual teaching about how to reach enlightenment, and what it means to reach enlightenment and decrease the ego and increase your holiness.
Brilliant mind.
A brilliant mind. But we all have the ability to do this with anything we read, anything we experience. We can read it. We can look at the pshat value. We can follow Rabbi Goldie Milgram's Torah study in 4 dimensions, and we can get to that point where we see a text, and then you go back to the mountain, and tonight, I don't know if you've all lit candles yet, but you can light the candles and perform the action, and then your performance of the action is now all the more enriched through your study of this text about the action, that now you have all of these other elements to it that are involved when you're doing it. Right? And so when you are lighting more candles every night, you're realizing that you're increasing in holiness. Or if you want to do it Beit Shammai's way, you're realizing that you're decreasing your ego. Or if you want each person in your household to light their own Hanukkah, their own menorah, you're affirming the fact that each person on their own can reach enlightenment, and they don't need a Rabbi to teach them to become enlightened. They don't need a tzaddik. They don't need an enlightened person. So our time is basically up, but I want to take questions or comments before we end.
So last night, we lit the candles at our children's house in Long Island, and they're little ones, and they were baptized Catholic, and my daughter-in-law is Polish Catholic, and so we hung we decorated the Christmas tree, and then we lit the candles, and we played a trail song. So usually we do it just one, and sometimes sometimes I Skype them every night, and that became unmanageable last year. There was missed nights and stuff and missed presents, so I decided, you know what, I remember the rabbi saying you could light all the candles at once. So I did it. Yes, I did it, and we had their 4 and 6 years old. They each got to light 4 candles. It was so beautiful for me, and so it was very meaningful. But I didn't know this other meaning, so now it's even more meaningful.
It's even more meaningful, and I would say there's a level of interpretation of how you experienced it that it's about family and it's about connection to your loved one, right? That Kalanim Kalman Halevi Epstein didn't even mention, right? That you have another level of interpretation, right? Based on your remez, based on your emotional experience of it, and you could probably even go deeper, if you wanted, into how each of the children, as they lit the candle, their own particular way of being with the candles. You could have gone deeper. But thank you for sharing. Anybody else have comments? Questions? Well, I invite you all to, you each have a beautiful chevruta, meaning a study partner, that you've come with today. I invite you to take a text. It doesn't have to be Torah. It can be a novel, a quote that you like, or it could be, something about Hanukkah, lighting the candles, and explore it together on all 4 of these levels. And share with each other how you're experiencing this thing that you're studying on all 4 of these levels. Thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Happy Hanukkah. And our next session, I think, is on December 17th. So I hope to see you then. And if not, I will tape it again as well. Thank you all watching in video land. And we'll see you later.